Hey everyone, I wanted to do a quick video that kind of walked through some of the methods that we have for factoring trinomials or quadratics, whatever you want to call them. And to start, I wanted to actually review a little bit of foiling so that we can kind of remember where these trinomials or quadratics come from and what we're trying to undo, because that's what we're trying to do with factoring is we're trying to get back to this format right here from a format where we've got ax squared plus bx plus c. So when we do FOIL things out, we do the first two terms multiplied together. So I'm going to be kind of ridiculous about this and write that, that we're going to do 2x times x. And then we do the outer terms, right? We get 5 times 2x. And then we do the inner terms and we get that -1 times x. And then we do our last terms and we get -1 times 5. And that when we, then kind of simplify this, normally what we do kind of in our heads here is that the first terms that we multiply and the last terms that we multiply, those don't have any common factors, right? We just get 2x squared and -5 there. But our two middle terms here, our positive 10x and minus x, those are like terms. And so we have to combine those. So that middle term comes from two different parts of our foiling. They come from multiplying the outside terms and then multiplying the inside terms and then adding those together. So that's something that we need to remember when we're looking at factoring, again, this quadratic that looks like this ax squared plus bx plus c, and here we ended up with 2x squared plus 9x minus 5. So, we're trying to figure out if we've got an equation that or an expression that looks like that, how are we going to factor that? So let's look at one where we don't know what the factors are right away. And we want to factor this. So again, we're trying to get it into this format that we've got up here that I'm circling with my laser pointer here. We want to get it as two of those binomial factors multiplied together. So what I know from looking at this, to get a 3x squared, there's only one way to multiply with whole numbers to get 3. That's with a 3 and a 1. So we had a 3x times a 1x, and you can just write that as just an x too. I won't write it as 1x after this moment. Also, we look at this 8 and go, okay, well, we either did 1 times 8 or we did 2 times 4. We're not totally sure. That's part of what we need to figure out. So then I oftentimes start these by doing guess and check and just taking my best guess, starting with the things that we know are true, that our two, first terms are going to be 3x and x. And then, looking at the signs in our problem and going, okay, we've got a positive sign right there. So that means that our signs are the same. And then our middle term tells us that they're both going to be negative. So what that's telling us down here in our terms is that we're going to have a minus and a minus. And now I'm just going to pick either the 1 and the 8 or the 2 and the 4 and just plug them into a spot. I'm taking my best guess. And so I don't know where to put them, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to put the 2 in with the 3x and the 4 in with the x. Now I need to check my answer because I don't know if I have the right middle term. I'm positive that I'm going to get 3x squared when I do the f part of foiling and positive 8 when I do the l part of foiling. But what I really, really need to check is when I do that inner term and outer terms, am I going to get the right middle term? So I'm going to quickly FOIL this out and see what I get. And like I said, I got my 3x squared, I got my plus 8. What I'm really needing to look at is those two middle terms. What do those combine to be? And those combine to be -14. So not good. That's not where we want to be. We want to be at -25. So we're going to have to make another guess. So the simplest next guess that you could make would be to flip-flop where you have the 2 and the 4. Now, I'm not going to do the whole process of refoiling this out because really all I want to check is what I get for these two middle terms. So I need to do that outer part and inner part of foiling and see, am I going to get -25x? Well, I'm going to get -6x minus 4, so I'm only going to get -10x in there. So again, still not right. All right, so now what that tells me, that's the only two options. I can't flip-flop, where the 2 and the 4 are anymore. That puts me back where I started. If I flip-flop the 3x and the x, again, that puts me right back where I started. So we're done with that option. So this tells me it's got to be 1 and 8. And thinking about this just a little bit more, to get 25, that's a pretty big number. So I think I'm going to put my 8 over on the other factor from the 3, because when I do that outer part of foiling, that's going to give me 3 times 8, which is going to be a bigger number. That's actually going to give me negative 24x, and then I'm going to get minus 1x, and we're going to get negative 25x. So there's our answer. Aha, we found it. So we can always do these with guess and check. Now, sometimes these get a little bit more annoying when you have some more options, but another choice that you have, so here I wanted to say this was our guess and check, is that we could do factoring by grouping. Now, factoring by grouping is really nice because this is a method. It always works, and you can do it step by step. So number 1 is to multiply a times c. Now the a and c that we're talking about is with a quadratic here that's written in standard form. The a is your coefficient on your x squared, and your c is your constant term. So we're going to multiply those two together. So in the problem that we're doing, our a is 3 and our c is 8. And so we get 24. Then number 2 is that we're going to list the ways to multiply to get a times c. So we're going to look at this number 24 here and say, what are our ways to multiply to get 24? Well, we can have 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, you know, how we actually originally got that 24, or 4 and 6. Now, number 3 is that I'm going to figure out what option from step 1, or no, not step 1, step 2, adds, we'll put kind of adds in quotes there, to b. And b is our middle term. So in this case, our b is 25. And actually, we want negative 25. And so we can think about the signs, just like we did up here, that they're both going to be negative, 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 negative. And maybe I'll even write them down here again. Both of them are negative. And I'm going to see which way, when I add these up, do I get negative 25? Well, it's the first option. It's with 1 and negative 24. The other ones give us negative 14, that gives us negative 11, and that gives us negative 10. What I want you to look back at on our video, though, is up here in our guess and check on our correct answer. Look what we got from the inside and the outside terms with foiling. We got negative 24 and negative 1. And ooh, that's exactly those terms that are sitting here. You can see our other, mistakes showing up, or our wrong guesses also showing up as options right there. There's the negative 4 and the negative 6. And over here we've got negative 2 and negative 12. That one's right there. So they're there. So what we're doing here with grouping is really kind of the same idea as unfoiling. We're going to pull this apart. So here is our winner. Those are our 2 numbers from step 2 that add up to be our B. And then the fourth step, I was going to say the 5th step. The 4th step is to split up B with the terms, or maybe the numbers. We'll say the numbers from step 3. So we've got our 3x squared minus 25x plus 8. We're going to split up that middle term. And it doesn't matter which one you write first or which one you write second. So I'm going to split this up as negative 24, or negative x, and then minus 24. And notice, like, again, back up here, that's exactly what we get from foiling. So this, what we wrote right here, is exactly what you get when you FOIL out your 2 factors. So we really are pulling this apart. And then the last step, which is 5, is to factor by grouping. This is not something we teach a lot in Math 103, but it is a useful skill if you like it. And when you're factoring by grouping, you group the first two terms together and the last two terms together. And then you look at them basically as kind of separate little problems and say, all right, for what I have underlined in orange, what's a common factor? And so I'm completely ignoring what's underlined in green and just looking at our 3x squared minus x. And they both have an x in common. So I can factor that out. And then I look at what we have underlined in green and ignore what's underlined in orange and say just those two things, just those two terms that we have underlined in green, what's their common factor? Their common factor, and if there's a negative sitting there in front, I'm going to factor out a negative. It's going to be negative, oops, I lost my green there, negative 8. And we're going to be left with 3x minus 1 when we factor out that negative 8. And now we look at these two terms and they both have a 3x minus 1. We can factor that out. 3x minus 1. Here we're left with x. Here we're left with minus 8. And we got the exact same factored form as we did up there when we were doing guess and check. So factoring by grouping is really nice, especially if you've practiced factoring by grouping before. But guess and check, it will always work. You sometimes have to go through several options, but it will work for you. Things to watch out for. I want to do another one really quickly with guess and check, because that is generally my preferred method, because if I'm really careful about my first guess, I sometimes get it right on the first try. And the more that you practice these, the more that you do get them right on the first try. But it's okay if you don't. It's totally all right. Oops. Oh, sorry, I hit a button. There we go. So the first thing that you should always check for when you're factoring, so rule number one is always look for common factors. Because right now, how this one's really hard to, well, really hard, it's strong language, but this is a lot harder to factor as it's written right now. But if we notice that we've got 3 times, no, not 3. Oh, no, wait. We can factor out a 3 on this. I was looking at my answer and going, my answer's not right. 3 times x, and then 3 times 3. There's a common factor of 3 in every single one of those terms, so we can factor out a 3. And then what we have left is much easier to factor. And why it's so much easier is now when you look at your constant term, and again, we can really ignore this 3 that's sitting out in front and just focus on what we have left here. And that 3, there's one way to multiply with whole numbers and get 3. 1 and 3. 1 times 3. That's it. When we had a 9 up here, it was 1 times 9 and 3 times 3. There were a couple of options. When we look at 9x squared, that's, again, a little annoying. There's a couple options there. And it's, 2 and 4 and 1 and 8. But when we had 24 sitting there, it was 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. There were a lot more choices. So factoring out that 3 really helps us and narrows down what we have left to factor. So again, I'm going to take my best guess at factoring this 8x squared minus 2x minus 3. I'm going to pick, 2 and 4. And, I know that we're going to have a 1 and a 3. I'm not sure exactly where they're going to go. I need to also think about signs. I've got a negative here, which tells us our signs are opposite. And the negative here tells us that after we multiply and do the inside and out, the bigger number needs to be negative. And so this one's got a little bit more for us to think about. But I'm just going to put stuff in and make a guess and hope that I didn't get it right the first try. I might have, it happens sometimes. So again, we can check the whole part of FOILing, but we really just need to check the inside and outside. But we can absolutely check the whole thing just to make sure that we're right. Again, that 3 is just going to kind of hang out. That part of the factoring is already done. We get 8x squared, which is excellent, minus 12x plus 2x, and then minus 3. So we didn't quite get what we needed, did we? No, we need to get a minus 2 in there. And so maybe what we need to do is try flipping around where we've got that 3 and that 1. And I guess I kept where we had the positive and the negative in the same spot. Kept the negative with the 2x and the positive with the 4x. And again, this is just a guess, so making my best guess. But we really only need to check what we get from the inner part and the outer part of foiling, and we get positive 2x as our middle term. Oh, we're really close. We're really close. We need negative 2x. So that tells me that all we need to do is flop where we have our positive and our negative. Aha, there we go. And this should do it. That outer term and that inner term, we get negative 6x, positive 4x, and we get negative 2. So there we are. We got it. We did it. We found it. But notice it took me, 3 different guesses, and that's okay. Don't feel bad if it takes you a few guesses to get to the right spot. The best thing to do on these is to keep your work neat so you can see what your other guesses are. Don't erase when you have a wrong answer, because you want to make sure that you don't pick that same guess again, because that can be really frustrating when you're working on these. So and like I said, as you do more and more of these, you actually make better guesses off the bat. I will also look at making another one of these towards around week 10 when we start doing some factoring some more. So in the meantime, try some factoring to practice in Alex. That's a really good place to practice these.